Hey everyone, Zeegers here. I think it's time to start talking about Phase 2 World of Warcraft Season of Discovery. It's around the corner here. So I wanted to showcase some of the locations that you can go ahead and AoE for experience to level from 25 to 40 for Phase 2. Now, there's a couple of ways to approach this. Fully World AoE or tag up with a Spell Cleave Dungeon group. RFK in a Spell Cleave group with like living bombs and whatnot is incredibly fast. You can do the runs in about 9-10 minutes if you're pumping and know how to pull the middle channel. The other option, as you start to get a couple of levels, is you could go into SM, which I think a lot of people are going to be doing Spell Cleave groups in SM, and mages are quite suited for that. Starting at level 25, there is an option on Alliance side to do stockades. Now, it is kind of a bit of a dry run. It's not really too fancy. You pull maybe about, anywhere from 6 to 10 mobs, and there's a bit of a pathing thing in front of the instance that you can kind of manipulate the mobs, and you just load up on living bombs and living flame, and you go to town, and you rinse and repeat, and you pull as much as you want for about 15 minutes, and then you can go ahead and reset the dungeon and do that over and over. Now, that in itself is going to be, bar none, the fastest way to level, starting at level 25 if you want to challenge yourself and you're on Alliance. That is an option, but mostly we're going to showcase where you could go World AoE if the competition isn't too steep on your server. So talking about level 25 right at the rip, my recommendation would be the Red Ridge Knolls. There's some pull examples here that we'll have that'll go over some of your options, and you can kind of pull it depending on how comfortable things are for you. There's about 3 pulls roughly that you can kind of bang out here. It's already pretty high contention on our servers for cloth and for leveling in that 20 range, but if you can kind of get out ahead of the pack, the next spot is going to treat you nice. Now, one last thing, when it comes to the Red Ridge Knolls, I would recommend doing this even if you're on a fresh mage, doing this anywhere between levels 22 and 27. That's where I would recommend Red Ridge Knolls to be. Once you get to about 27, it starts to roll off quite a bit, and your option past that would be the Duskwood Worgens. Now, the Duskwood Worgens, I would recommend probably going there no earlier than level 28. If you go a little bit earlier than that, you might run into some resistance issues, as you can find some level 30s there. But I would recommend, if you're going to go to the Duskwood Worgens, I would recommend 28 to 32 for that zone. There's a couple of areas that you can kind of utilize. Again, you can layer swap, but make sure not to do it too often, because I'm not sure exactly how often you can swap layers, but I think it's around 4 or 5 times per like 20 minutes or a half hour. Someone can correct me in the comments, but there is a limitation to how many times that you can layer swap. As some of you in the WoW Classic space may know, that was something that was utilized quite heavily in the very first World 60, which was done by Joker. The layer swapping is absurd experience. So there's this camp that we're at right now, and then there's kind of another little area by some caves that you can go ahead and do some AoE pulls there, 1-2 pulls, and you're kind of done. And you can kind of bounce back between these 2 locations. Tree cover makes this annoying. There are more pulls that you can do, but these are probably the 2 most common areas that you're going to go ahead and farm these Duskwood Worgens. Now, you do get another option here in Duskwood that's a little bit lower than the Worgens as well. You can farm these ghouls that are at the graveyards and whatnot. It's a pretty hot spot for AoE as well, and there's also a couple of quests in that area, so depending on when you hit it, you could double dip or just do it for the experience, but you can have this as an option as well, so Worgens or these ghoul camps. But again, I would probably sit anywhere between 28 to 32, because at 32 something really good opens up, and that is the Arathi Highland Orc Goshek Farm. Now, the Arathi area here is absurd. You can start it at about 32. There are a couple of mobs that run around at about 34, and I think there's 135 every so often, but it is doable. Just be safe. I did this on hardcore as well. It's totally doable. There's 2 camps, and eventually you can do this all in 3 pulls, and then there'll be a little bit of waiting, but you can do it on a cycle with ice block. You do 1 full camp on ice block, you do the other camp on ice block, and then you kind of have a filler pull that you're going to go ahead and do towards the end where the silos are. You can kind of clean it all up, and then every so often there will also be one of the quest courier. It's a group of 5 that will spawn, and you can kind of pull them if they're available there as well to beef up one of the pulls. They're Forsaken Bodyguards, also a quest item, so you can kind of double dip there. But for this location, I would recommend that you could stay there or start there rather at 32. I highly recommend that. And you can even push this all the way to 40 if you choose to. There is another location that we'll talk about here really quick. The Arathi orc camps are amazing. It's steady Freddy, and especially as you get closer to that 38, it does roll off quite a bit. That 37, 38, it starts to really roll off because you get into the green mob status. But if there's no contention, I mean, obviously you can just kind of keep banging it out and it's pretty chill. Throw in some tunes and you're good to go. The other location that I recommend is something that you can start at 38, and that is going to be the Dustwallow Murlocs. Very popular. 38 is where you can kind of start this, and on hardcore this can be a little sketchy, but if you're safe about it, you should be okay. There's a couple of patrols. One that happens in this first area that we're highlighting, it kind of runs around the island, and then there's another patrol that runs up and down the beach. So you just have to be mindful of it. At some point you're going to run into this and you're going to see what I'm talking about and know what to look out for. But starting at 38, you can go ahead and pull this island, and then there's also a little spot that's up towards the ramp here that kind of has some tree cover and a couple of camps there. That's the easier of the two pull, depending on who you ask, but either way you can utilize your ice blocks however you want, and eventually you're going to have ice barrier, which makes this tremendously easy in comparison to not having ice barrier. Ice barrier is massive, especially when your ice blocks are down, taking that damage as you're trying to get the pull all together. But some really good experience here. I recommend starting no earlier than 38 for most. You can game it, but 38 is a comfortable level. And technically you can do this up to 43, which later on we'll cover some other AoE stuff in phase 3 for the 40 to 50 range, some of the locations that you can do and shred it up. Now, like I said earlier, the fastest way to level is going to be, especially on the Alliance side, stockades. If you can kind of get in there and just grind it out, you can probably do that up until about 31 very, very comfortably, and you could almost blend that right into going into, say, Arathi, Goshek Farm, or you can just finish out the Duskwood Worgens and then kind of blend over there at 32, because I do recommend 32 for it. You're going to have SM group options, spell cleave options. You're going to have RFK options for at least, you know, a chunk of 7 levels, and then you can even do more of the instance as you guys get stronger. But there's kind of a middle channel there in RFK with all the boars that is really, really lucrative, and you can go all the way to the end and kill some of the humanoids as well. It's great experience, and you can do that in about 9 to 10 minutes, so it can kind of scale as you want if you're doing a group. The other option too is you can do RFD, which is right across the street from RFK. RFD has some options and some really good gear in there too, depending on your class. So not a bad option. And again, it's always going to be good in SM. I think a lot of people on the Horde side, they'll probably get a group together with their friends and just honestly live in SM for pretty much all the way up to 40 if they wanted to. Armory is insane for experience. Same with Cathedral. Even Graveyard is really, really good. For an entry, you can kind of slingshot from Graveyard into Armory. You just basically have to run Library for the key and then you're good to go. So you can do pretty much any option there. World AoE is always an option, but each server is going to be a little bit different in terms of contention and whether or not you can kind of get that space. But try changing layers, right? On ours, Lone Wolf, about 10 layers. Always going, if not more, so just see what makes most sense for you. Now, talking about runes and specs without taking anything into account from P2, we're going to talk about what's available to us now. So probably recommend everybody run this. That is Living Bomb, Living Flame, and Regen Rune. That trio right there is something that I recommended for 1 to 25 when it came to leveling, and it's honestly just really, really strong. Putting a Regen Rune on yourself or others and then comboing that up with Living Flame is absurd healing. It scales with however many targets it hits, and if it goes untouched without like a target cap, I can see mages just doing crazy stuff in phase 2. For now, those are the 3 that I recommend because they can be comboed very, very well. Now, talking about the talent calculator for mages, I would recommend a couple of options. So option 1 looks something like this. This is probably what I would do pre-level 40, pre-Ice Barrier access. You get Ice Barrier technically at level 40 because you get enough points to throw into the Frost Tree. You would have 2 into Arcane Stability, 3 into Arcane Focus, and then you would get your full Arcane Concentration because clear casting is absurdly strong, especially when you're dealing with limited mana pools. However, some people are going to be pretty stacked with gear. They're going to have high mana pools, so it might not be that big of a thing, so it could be a lower priority. And then over on the Frost side, I am a big fan of Elemental Precision because that also helps for blizzard resists and all of that sort of fun stuff. Then the Frost Warding goes a long way for the extra armor. And then you're going to want to go 2/2 Frost Nova and then 3/3 into Permafrost. It combos well with anything blizzard wise. You're going to have the 1 into Piercing Ice, You're going to have 3 into Improved Blizzard and 1 into the Cold Snap. That gives you the next tier here, which then 2 goes into Arctic Reach, 3 into Frost Channeling, and then that last 21st point is going to go into Ice Block, because Ice Block pairs really well with large pulls, and you can also Cold Snap and then force another Ice Block or your second pull just to keep the frequency up. Now, I recommend this build even with the runes that we were talking about, because I do think that when you go to pull a big mob or a big group of mobs, you can go ahead with an Ice Block or getting that Nova down. And as you're kind of getting your distance from them, you can kind of tap a regen rune on you and then throw the Living Flame out and then go into your Improved Blizzard. And when that all kind of comes together, it's going to be absurd damage, and your uptime for pulls are going to be huge as long as the mobs are there or the layer swaps complement you as well. And that's even much the same when it comes to Dungeon Cleave as well. I recommend that as well, because again, that Living Flame cleaves on as many targets are in the fire, and that it's going to combo nice with your Improved Blizzard. Now, in terms of priority, like what do you go first, what do you go second? Again, personal preference for most, but what I do is I would do the Frost up to at least Improved Blizzard ASAP, because that's incredibly valuable. For the slow, more damage goes out, the mobs are slower, etc. I would probably focus on clear casting last, and I would fill out this tree on the Frost side up until what you see, and then I would start over on the Arcane side. Yes, Arcane concentration is good for clear casting, but honestly, this toolkit right here is the cookie cutter when it comes to AoE for the mage side. Now at level 40, it's kind of whatever you'd like. You can pretty much go any spec. If I was going AoE only, this is probably what I would prioritize if I wanted Ice Barrier for P2. This just gives me a lot of strength in the AoE space with the Improved Blizzard, the Permafrost, the extra Frost Warding. Again, by this point, with the gear that we're seeing in SOD, the mana pools are starting to spike, so concentration kind of goes down lower on my priority. I put full into Piercing Ice because that's 6%, and that also works towards your Blizzard as well. The 1 point in Improved Cone of Cold is kind of nice too, because it's 15% versus the second and third is only 10% per, and then that goes into Ice Bear. I don't recommend Winter's Chill, and I don't even recommend it for PvE. It's something that the math might be a little off. It's been a long time, but when I first started playing WoW Classic, I think you need something like 7 mages with 1 running Winter's Chill to be a net plus. Can't remember the exact math behind there, but wouldn't worry about Winter's Chill almost in any case. Now this is just for AoE. All right, so for PvP, this is kind of what it would look like. There's a couple of subjective changes depending on how you want to flow this, but I would get 5 out of 5 on Improved Frostbolt, because that is something that I'm going to be casting frequently, whether it's a max rank or a rank 1. Now for PvP, you need for spellcasters anyways, you need 3% to be capped or hit in PvP. So if your gear has 3%, you can go ahead and just drop this Elemental Precision, and you can change it over into, say, Frost Channeling. You know, you could go 1 point into Improved Blizzard or whatever you want. That's kind of a free point, even Improved Cone of Cold, because that's big damage as well. It gives you 2%, so most may be able to get that 1% elsewhere, but something to keep in mind, you do want 3%, so I would recommend at least putting 1 point into LE Precision until you can have some shifting power there. Permafrost is something that you could shift out, but the biggest benefit for PvP with Frost is going to be the slow ability. So Cone of Cold gives a really nice slow ability, and compounded with Permafrost, that allows you to be a little bit more elusive and get your space and do what you need to do. So again, you can be shimmying things around. You could put 1 in there, something like that if you really wanted to, but honestly, I would recommend it looking something, again, just like what you see here. So 5/5 into Improved Frostbolt, 1 into LE Precision, depending on your hit, and then you're going to get everything in this row right here: Ice Shards, Frostbite, Improved Frost Nova, and Permafrost. Can't tell you how many times Frostbite procs, although it only says 15%. Some people would argue that it's higher, but it is great when it goes off. Now, the biggest combo wombo is going to be Ice Shards with Shatter. It's called your Shatter combo. This increases your crit strike from frost spells by 100%, and Shatter gives you a 50% increase on that against frozen targets. So when Frostbite procs, that is a frozen target. If Frost Nova goes out, that is a frozen target. So it's very good together. Cold Snap is always a bread and butter with Ice Block. It just gives you options, also refreshes your Frost Nova. Arctic Reach is incredibly good, especially for Cone of Cold hits. It allows you to almost keep that sweet spot, that dead zone. If you think about a hunter, that dead zone between range and melee, this is kind of what helps you get your dead zone against people as well. Another thing that I recommend too is jumping. So there's a whole other conversation here that we could have about leeway, but the quick TLDR of leeway is depending on how you're running. So if you're running holding W, your hitbox is the largest. If you're side strafing, it becomes a little smaller. And if you're backpedaling, it is the smallest. Also, jumping changes your leeway. So on that, compounding in with Arctic Reach, when you jump and you say hit Nova or you hit Cone of Cold, your range actually increases. So it's incredibly important to kind of weave that into your gameplay. Try to jump when you're trying to get that extra little bit of range, and you'll notice a bit of a difference. Now again, frost channeling is something that you can drop out and shift over a couple of points if you don't really care for the reduced mana cost. It is something that is not overly needed for PvP. You could drop another point, put it into Improved Cone of Cold, only run 1 point in there, or you could even drop both points and drop it into Elemental Precision, giving you 4% and that PvP hit cap. That is an option too, and like I said a little bit earlier, we're going to see a lot higher mana pools going into Phase 2, so I do think that that is something that you could look at or consider as an option. So once you get that row with the Arctic Reach and the Frost Channeling, however you want to do it, again, you're going to make sure that you get 5 out of 5 Shatter. You got your Ice Block, and then that goes into Ice Bearer. So this right here is what I'm most likely going to run. Chances are, if I don't have the correct hit, like I said, I'm going to drop another point out of Frost Channeling and go into Elemental Precision, and I'm still undecided if I'm going to keep 1 point in there. I'll see how my mana pool is in certain fights and make a decision there, but that 15% on Cone of Cold is massive and super strong against melee. So this is what my PvP build would look like in P2. I think that covers most things for P2. I do plan on doing a video for P3 and P4, just talking about different things AoE, different things PvP. If you guys like the content, feel free to hit the like and subscribe. We are live every day except for Wednesdays on Twitch and Kick, and we get a lot of offline content, different highlights and whatnot on YouTube. We also have a wonderful Discord community if you guys want to join on up or look for new homies to play games with. We are on Lone Wolf Alliance. We run a community guild here, and everybody is welcome. So have fun in Phase 2. I know I'm looking forward to it. And happy hunting. If you have any questions, let us know.